To start out, we always want to call before we haul. So you always want to make a call to the customer and confirm that you are meeting today and the address is this and so on and so forth. I've done it. I've been guilty of it where I just took off down the road and drove an hour and a half away and got ghosted or they didn't answer or they forgot. It can happen. So make sure you call before you go anywhere. Also, there are some things on the list here that I included so that you don't forget the tools that you need. So obviously we're going to take the transit so we can take elevations. I even put extra batteries on there. So raise your hand if you've ever showed up to a job and had dead batteries on the transit. For those of you who haven't raised their hand, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. We want to make sure we got stakes to mark the building corners off. I like to take at least 6 to 8. That's a good comment. A regular building, typically only a normal square building has 4 corners. I've had stakes break on me. The ground, depending on if you're taking, you can take wood stakes or surveying stakes. You can get them at A&M. They come in 36 and 48-inch lengths. I personally like rebar stake because you can drive them into harder ground. So you can do wood or rebar, up to you. Make sure you got some flag tape. So this is important for visual. So being able to see the stakes when you're out, when there's grass and trees and rebar's mounted, it just helps you be able to see things a little bit better. And it'll show in your photos. When you're taking photos of the building or the layout, you'll be able to see the corners better. You also want to take a measuring wheel. And I like to include a 100-foot tape measure. So either one, but it's better to have both. And that also depends on the building size. If you've got a 50 by 100 building and you bring a 100-foot tape measure, that tape measure is not going to be long enough to measure the diagonal on your stakes. I did not include a hammer on the list, so we'll have to add that. Pay attention as you're driving in and notice things like overhanging trees, tight corners. If they have a long driveway, we might have trouble getting trucks in there. A lot of times you'll see, especially around here, in this post oak country, we've got a lot of live oaks and post oaks with trees growing sideways, and lots of times they'll be driving over people's driveways. So you want to watch out for that. Screws on here. So when you're placing your tripod, you want to be thoughtful about it because you need to make sure that a laser can hit every corner. Everywhere you want to measure the elevation, you got to make sure that there's an unobstructed view to it. Another thing to be aware of is the elevation that you set this tripod at. You want to make sure that, at least for me, if I set it up right here, I don't have to carry it that far from the truck. But if I walk 100 feet that way and it's a 7-foot drop over 100 foot, just for an example, I'm going to be measuring up here because that's where my laser's at. Does everybody understand how this works? This thing shoots a perfectly level laser, and then the transmitter, which we attach to that pole there, when that meets the laser, it dings at you. And then we use a stick to measure the change in elevation. Just make sure you keep that in mind when you're setting up your transit. It doesn't look like we're going to have a whole lot of elevation change here, but it does look like it goes downhill. So I'll just make sure I put this a little bit lower so that when I'm measuring, it's about a comfortable working height right here. Another little tip is the corners on this transit block the laser. So at every corner, there's a blind spot. So I always look, if I know, most of the time we're going to set the building corners before we set the transit up. That makes the most sense, right? So then you can make sure that, I want to make sure I don't have a corner of the building right in line with the corner of this transit because the laser won't catch it. All right, so today we are going to stake out what size building? 40 by 60? Oh, that's a good one. We got 2 trains. I can slip my 100-foot tape measure over it to hold my tape. When we're making a recommendation, you really want to look for the levelest place. You got to think about how they're going to be using the building, accessibility, how are they going to access the building depending on how they use it. You could give a recommendation. Usually they'll have an idea, they just don't know how to tell you. But a lot of times my first question is, where do you imagine the corner of the building? And then I say, go stand on the corner of your building. And so they'll go stand on it. I said, now face the direction that you want it to face. So if they choose this corner and they're like, I want it like this. So what corner are you on? Is the building gonna go that way or that way? And so that's usually a good starting.
I want it right here.
So the first thing we'll do is grab that stake in. I'll leave it up to the customer. At the end of the meeting, I'll ask them do you want us to leave these stakes here or would you like me to pick them up? That just depends on what they want. I don't always drive the stake in too much on the first go round because more times than not, you'll end up doing this more than once on the same day. So you might get it faked out and they say, well, I don't really like that. Let's move it this way or let's change it this way. And so you may end up moving it, but also this is a real rough estimate, right? This is not like just because we place the stakes here today, this is early in the sales process. So just because we put them here today doesn't mean it's not a final decision. That's not where it has to go. This is just for estimating purposes. Now, if we are a project manager, do the site work or pour the concrete, then it gets a little more exact. So he said 17 foot off the goalpost, and we're going to make it parallel with the goalpost.
I want it 60 feet this way, 40 feet that way.
So we're going to go 60 feet this way and 40 feet this way. To get it parallel,
Bring a stake in it. The hammer.
before you stake anything down, let's just lay it on the ground first. Now he said he wanted it parallel with the goalpost. So we pulled 17 foot off for that stake. All we got to do is make sure that we're 17 foot at two different points from the goalpost. You can see that I'm not at quite 17 foot. In this case, I've got a helper. I could just tell him to move the stake that way. If I was here by myself, I could just make a mark in the grass with my foot or put another stake there. That way I know that my line is approximately or just about parallel with whatever we're trying to reference. Tanner, we got it parallel and we got our 60 foot run. Now what we need to do is get the other two corners staked off. And we want to make sure it's square. First thing that I do is I would measure. You can take your tape, bend it around like this, and we know we need to be 40 foot this way. Does that make sense? So you can get, Tanner, what are we on the corner there? 60 foot 3? 60 foot even, all right? So I'm gonna be looking for 40 foot or 100 foot even. You can eyeball it at first. But what I'll do is I'll lay this stake down at 100 foot. Use my other stake. So this is just a reference point. I'm not gonna put anything in the ground yet. We'll use a calculator to get the diagonal from here to there. I have a construction calculator app here. So the diagonal measurement that I've come up with is 72 1 and 5/16. So all we need to do is attach our tape measure to this corner that we started with down there, and we're gonna take this and we're gonna find 72 1 and 5/16 and make sure it's in line with our stake. Does that make sense? So 72 1 is right here, but it's not 100 foot that way, right? If I move the tape measure to my 100 foot mark, you can see that this line is going to intersect with my measurement. And then you can take your other stake and place that in the ground there. And once you've got one diagonal, that's all you need. You don't have to pull another diagonal. All we're going to do now, we're just going to measure 40 foot from our starting point this way. Same thing as we did earlier. We're just going to lay this stake on the ground at 40 foot. And then we're going to measure from our back corner to get 100 foot.
60.
Our line, our mark. So we've got our building staked out.
I like to check the diagonal one more time just to make sure, because sometimes you can make a calculator error.
I want to check it just to be positive. We can measure the diagonal again just to confirm that our calculations are right, that our measurements right. 72 1 was on 72 1 and a quarter or something like that. And you can see it's the exact same. So that's how you get your building staked out, square.
What if you got a lean-to
If you've got,
halfway down the building?
yeah, so that's what the extra stakes would be for. If you've got a lean-to attached to one side, you could just carry this out. I like to take the overall building footprint. So if it's got a 10 foot lean-to, I'm making my box, my square, 50 by 60. And then I just do the footprint. If the customer wants to see it, with some extra stakes showing where the lean-to's at. You can add stakes. You just measure off your corner. So if you have like a 10 by 10 lean-to on this corner, if it was 10 foot out here and 10 foot this way, I would make my building footprint 40 by 70. Just to be, that's going to be more dirt right here where there's not a lean-to that we're going to include, but mule shoot. All right, so once it's all marked out, we got the flag tape. As soon as I put the stakes in, I just go around and put flag tape on it so that it's visible. And then once we start taking the elevation, if they want to see where the floor would be, then we can add a piece of tape or whatever. I make my tails long, gives you more to look at. All right, so I'm just gonna go through my checklist here and make sure I'm getting everything. Got the building laid out. Now we're gonna go back to setting that transit up. So let's walk back over there. All right, so now we can look and see and make sure that we can see all our corners of the building and anything else that we might be interested in measuring the elevation. I like to start by just eyeballing the transit, getting it close, turn it on, and this is the auto leveler transit, so it automatically levels, and when it does level, it'll start spinning and we'll know it's ready. Sometimes it's helpful to me, I might draw a little picture right here, a box in this case, and then I'll write down the goal where the goal post is. We use that for a reference. Then I'll label my corners. So you can label them. I think we do we do A, B, and C? We can do A, B, C, D, or 1, 2, 3, 4. So let's go take some elevations. What is our ground level elevation? Ground level? What we're doing is we're measuring the ground, the change in elevation at each point in reference to the laser level, to the laser line. So we're pretty close there. I always just round up. So there we've got 2'8" or 2'7", just whatever's closest. So I got this marked as corner B, so I'm gonna put 2 foot. So we'll just go around to all 4 corners. Keith, can you tell me what the elevation is on this corner? So if you're doing this by yourself, you can see right here that there's arrows on the back here, and it'll tell you, when you get close, it'll tell you if you need to go up or down. So you need to go way up. Or you can tighten it down. This instrument is very sensitive. So I think it gets you into within a 16th. So you can, that's good. When it's blinking up and down, you're there. So what's our reading there, Keith? It's okay to round up or down. 4 foot 7 inch. So how does that differ from our first point? 2 foot. So from that point to this point, we've got a 2 foot elevation change. So to come up to that point there, we're gonna have to put in at least 2 foot of select fill just to get level over there. All right, so we will move on to our next point. Marcus, would you do the honor?
From back here so they see what's going on.
Oh man, that always happens.
Oh,
So
no.
you just have to open up your thing a little more to where it'll slide over that. It doesn't have to be exact. So that is my corner C. You want to tell us what our elevation is here? Here, I got you. So I just see that this is about the same elevation. There's not much change between these 2 points. So I just figured 2'7" would be a good place to start to look when you're looking for your line. 2'8". So we're about an inch difference from corner to corner B. I always like to take an additional measurement in the center. I'll just walk out to the center of where the hill is, halfway down the hill or so, just to get an average. The more information you can provide the estimator, the better off you'll be. I'm more interested in how this hill is changing. So I got 3'4" here. So I'll know that on my sheet. Do we see any potential drainage issues here? Imagine if water comes off the building, where is it going to go? That way. So I don't see any drainage issues here. As long as you have the building floor height up higher than the surrounding grade and the water has a place to go, you more than likely you're not going to have any drainage issues. So no drainage issues on this site, but we just want to make sure that we think about that when we're on site. No access challenges for the concrete trucks, no access challenges for steel deliveries. We've got plenty of space out here for staging materials. If there was no space to stage materials, we would want to note that or write that down, just make a note of it. Anything else?
I got a question. What if the customer? So, at what point do you discuss the elevation of the building with the customer? Do you do that at all? Ask him where he wants the floor height or anything?
Sure, absolutely. So that brings up a great point. We have to start with the minimum, right? And then we can go from there. So ideally what we do is we find the highest point where the building's going to be located, and then we want the finished floor to be 6 inches to a foot higher than that at minimum. That's just what we recommend. Tanner, I think you marked 6 inches there.
Because it's such a drop right here.
He took his tape measure and went 6 inches up from that point. Now that flag could either be the top of our pad or it could be the top of our finished floor. If it's the top of the pad, then we're going to come and set forms above that point, which will make the finished floor even higher. Does that make sense? If we're talking about that's the finished floor height, then we would bring our dirt basically level. We would bring our pad level with the ground unit. We wouldn't build it up anymore. I think having the finished floor 6 inches above the ground level there in this location is plenty. So it would save us 6 inches of dirt across the whole building area. And then it would allow for easier access on this all the way around,
If
really.
it was sloped more up that way, it'd probably be better to go higher with it so that you can create a ditch essentially so that the water can drain away from the building.
So this would be a good example of at the bottom of this hill here. If we were putting it here and we had doors here and this was all being, and we were only the finished floor was only 6 inches higher. If they got a hard, heavy rain and water's running down real fast and it can't get out of the way fast enough, it can't get around the building fast enough, it could flow into the building. So extra height there makes a difference. That would just be one scenario.
Just think you have to look at when you're just talking about this with the customer.
If you want to match the high corner, just put 0. The next option really is 6 inches. 9.9 out of 10 times it's going to be 0 or 6 inches. Soil conditions. What kind of soil are we staying? Pretty soft.
Soft.
That tells you what kind of moisture, that the ground's got moisture for sure. Surface soil is never the same as subsurface, right? So it's hard. You can't tell what the subsurface soil conditions are without digging a hole. But it doesn't hurt to. Sometimes there are clues that you can see on the surface soil that will tell you what's going on here. So that's topsoil, but it's almost like a loam, right? Some sort of loam, sandy. If you walk out to a job site and you see cracks in the ground, y'all have seen that before, right? That's a clay soil. So when it dries out, it shrinks, and when it gets wet, it swells. So that's bad for foundations. So we want to plan for that. Make your best guess based on what you're looking at that. Nothing seems out of normal. I would probably just put the sandy loam right here. You've got options to choose from on the form. Drainage considerations. What would we put here?
I would agree.
All right, access type. We just talked about this, but it's on this form as well. So everything's good there. Any clearing requirements here? No, there is not one tree in or around this building. So when should we note clearing requirements?
A lot of trees. Yeah.
When there are trees nearby the building perimeter. If there's a tree within 20 foot or so of the building, it needs to be noted. It might not require clearing, but it should be observed and noted. Here's a box on this form for estimated clearing area. If they say, well, I want the building plus 50 foot around the building cleared. So you would be able to put down your clearing area there. Type is complete, yes. All right. We take GPS coordinate of building corners. So the way that I do this is I just use my phone.
You can use any app on the phone. I don't think this one does sea level, but I think the regular maps on your phone will measure sea level. So some jobs, if you're in a homeowners association, they have a minimum requirement above sea level for. How are you supposed to know that, right? You just set it down right there. The compass. Oh yeah, use compass. So we're at 190 foot elevation here. GPS is 29.429.
You can stand here and screenshot it. Because when you're building your layout on Google Earth, you can type the GPS coordinates in and then you got your point. Sometimes you don't, sometimes your nearest fence might be to the road, or there might not be a fence. You may be out in the middle of a huge open field, nothing to reference. So that's another option. How many do we take? 10?
Site photos.
Just make sure you cover everything that needs to be, the entire site plus anything else that needs to be noted.
I think, especially if there's structures or anything, right? You want more pictures. If there's more structures on property, you probably want more pictures. If it's an open field, probably not so much.
If you're not sure if you need the picture, take the picture.
It's a good way to look at it. Yeah, so take lots of photos. We want photos of proposed building location, photo of the entire site, high and low ground areas, soil conditions, entry driveway, access conditions, trees near the footprint, overhead power lines close by, underground utilities if marked, well or septic locations, existing electrical service, adjacent structures, pictures showing drainage conditions, anything that might be helpful to correctly estimate the site work. If we show up to a site and it's on the side of a mountain, what do we do there?
Give them a mezzanine floor. Quote it 5 times.
Hey.
Quote it 5 times, and then
How about this? We show up to the site and it's in the floodplain, and we've got to come up about 8 foot to get the building out of the 100-year floodplain.
I would know we're in the flood.
Well, that's a good
if
question.
you're by a river, you're probably in the floodplain.
Honestly, this is in floodplain.
Yes,
Yeah,
for
it
sure.
is.
Anyway, sometimes the site may be really bad. It could be on the side of a mountain. It could be in the middle. It could be in a hole. It could be in a flood zone. So it's not all. It doesn't always make sense to build in places like that. You really have to weigh the cost of making it buildable versus the value you're going to get out of the project. Make sure that you use this opportunity to build rapport, understand the type of person and their communication styles. If it's, anyways, y'all know what I'm talking about there. The purpose of the site visit is to advance to the next step. So we want to come here, do our thing, and then confirm the next step and make sure that we have buy-in for the next step. So we can reiterate what we talked about in the building design meeting and then reiterate what the next step is. The higher you build a site up, the further out you have to, the more room it's going to take to feather that dirt out so that you have an appropriate grade percentage away from the building. So too steep, it's not accessible, it's going to have severe runoff, that sort of thing. And of course, the flatter you want it, or the less steep you want it, the more dirt and the further distance it's going to take. So sometimes you don't have that luxury. Sometimes the building has to go where it's going, that's the only place, and you don't have the luxury of a wide open field to feather it out and lots of money for lots of dirt. So in those cases, we can do an exposed beam on the side where essentially from the ground, you'll have however many feet of exposed concrete, and then your building will start there instead of having the dirt come all the way up. So we did a project like that across town. It was in the flood zone. It was for an RV park. They didn't have a lot of space, but they had to have the elevation up out of the floodplain. So what we ended up doing was we formed it up. The forms were 3 or 4 feet tall, and so we poured the slab like that. And so you walk up to the building, and the top of the slab's right here. And so we did that, and they ended up building a deck around it with stairs and stuff. So that's an option too.